Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I deeply appreciate your listenership. So we just wrapped up the first ever Confident Women Rising online summit. And I just got to say, wow. I mean, this summit exceeded my every expectation. We had over 2,500 women participate. There was so much incredible energy, not just from the participants, but also from the speakers. And the crazy thing is, we nearly, for a moment, canceled the event. We really weren't sure with COVID happening that this was the right time. And boy, did we prove to ourselves that it was indeed the right time. I think that people, women specifically, were very hungry for the topic of how to be more confident in their ability to show up for themselves. We had an incredible lineup of speakers that, although they each spoke to a very unique topic in the space of women's wellness, there was an underlying current to what they were all speaking to that tied the entire event together. And I think that in some ways, people being at home and not being able to go about their regular lives sort of contributed to the success of the event. So if you were a participant or a speaker in the event, I cannot thank you enough for making our first experience of hosting a summit absolutely magical. And later this month, we are opening an opportunity to join our membership site, the Grace and Grit membership site, which is actually called Rumble and Rise. And funny enough, our membership site has existed for, I think it's been 8 months now. We started a membership site about 8 months ago. But it's really important to me that people go through the consistency code, which is my main program. It's a 4-week program before they get access to Rumble and Rise. But we're kind of reorganizing everything to make it easier for people to get into the membership site. And so the thing that I want to speak into this month is just the concept of Rumble and Rise and what it is in terms of what does it mean to rumble and what does it mean to rise? Because this is really kind of the underlying thread of my work. It's the crux of my work. So today we're going to focus specifically on what it means to rumble and why it's so important and awesome to rumble, as difficult as it sometimes is. You know, we have this belief that we will make a decision to up-level our life in some way. We commit to improving an area of our life. And often we have the assumption that it's going to go smoothly because we've decided the clouds are going to part, the roads are going to clear, the birds are going to come out and usher us along our perfectly executed journey. But you all know that's not how it works. That's rarely, if ever, how it works. What happens is we commit to up-leveling our life in some new way, and life smacks us upside the head. Take COVID-19, for example, right? I mean, it feels like the rug has been pulled out from underneath our feet. Life as we know it is very disrupted. And we're being presented with an unbelievable opportunity to rumble with change and uncertainty and how we show up in the face of that. Now, in the Confident Women Rising Summit, I introduced the event and closed the event with the reminder that health is not a destination. Health is not an outcome. Health is a journey of self-leadership. And it is a lifetime journey of self-leadership, meaning the journey doesn't end until you die. And the only way that we can lead ourselves well through our life is to know ourselves well throughout our life. And doesn't every age and stage present you with new opportunities to get to know yourself? We get presented with new challenges in our life. Age changes us. Different opportunities present themselves. So getting to know yourself, it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. Because you keep having the opportunity to get introduced to new parts of yourself. And that's amazing. That's a wonderful part of life. And that can very much feel like a rumble. So when I say the word rumble, and when I think of rumbling, I think of wrestling, right? I think of kind of a tussle with someone or something. Rumbling is working hard to figure something out. It's being determined to sort something out, to rise up to a new level. A rumble is kind of the requirement of things worth pursuing, right? And what I mean by that is the things that are worth pursuing in our life are things that we also have to be willing to fail for. And that means that just because we decide to pursue something doesn't mean that we're going to expect ourselves to execute it perfectly, especially if it's something we've never done before. Now, I know a lot of you listening, that is actually the opposite of what you expect. You do expect yourself to do it perfectly, which is why you never get started. But if you think about it, the things that are truly worth pursuing, right? Think about your passions and pursuits in your life. I don't know what they are, but you do. Is it a sport? Is it your career? Is it your art? Is it your family? Is it your marriage? I guarantee those things that really light you up and make you feel alive came at a price. You didn't roll into motherhood a perfect mother. You didn't roll into marriage a perfect wife. You didn't roll into your career excellent at what you do from the get-go. I guarantee if you have an art or a sport or a hobby that you really love, you probably weren't all that great at it from the beginning. And yet, it was something that you wanted to pursue. It was something worth failing for. And how did you learn to be an awesome mom, an awesome wife, amazing at your career, amazing at all these other things? Because you were willing to fail. You were willing to rumble. You were willing to get to know yourself so you could do better. So Brené Brown is kind of the queen of the rumble in my world. It's a word that I kind of clung to in one of her books. I can't even tell you what book it was. I've read all of her books. But I use rumble constantly. In fact, it's really awesome because now I talk to my clients and they use the word rumble when they're talking to me, and I just love it. So rumble is a word I use a lot. And the way that Brené Brown defines rumble is this. A rumble is a discussion, a conversation, or a meeting defined by a commitment to lean in to vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, and to stick with the messy middle of problem identification and solving, to take a break and circle back when necessary, to be fearless in owning our parts. And as psychologist Harriet Lerner teaches, to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. So that's a pretty hardy definition of rumbling, right? So rumbling is a discussion, a conversation, or a meeting is how she begins. And to me, that's how you forge relationships. And you, my friends, are absolutely in a relationship with yourself. And that relationship is what your health story is born out of. So if you don't spend time with yourself, getting to know yourself, listening to yourself, honoring your needs, staying curious about who you are and what lights you up, you will have a hard time optimizing your health. I also love that she says it's a commitment to leaning into vulnerability. Because, oh my word, when you commit to up-leveling your health in any way, be it mental or physical, we have to lean into vulnerability because we have to lean into developing skills that we're not all that awesome at doing. And that makes us feel very vulnerable. We have to admit our weaknesses. We have to admit the gaps in our behavior. I love that she emphasizes to stay curious and generous because, ladies, when we are learning new skills and up-leveling our life, we are often not curious and generous with ourselves. We are judgmental and downright mean to ourselves. And we make the rumble unnecessarily difficult. We make it like a battle. You know, a rumble to me is like two boys out in the lawn, like messing around and like they're fighting, but it's also out of love. It's not going to war with your enemy, right? That's a fight. That's a battle. That's a war. A rumble is not a war. A rumble is loving wrestling. She also says that we are willing in the rumble to stick with the messy middle of problem identification and solving. And that requires being willing to get uncomfortable. And we do not live in a culture that promotes discomfort. That's why we drink so much and we eat so much and we do all kinds of things to distract ourselves from our problems, from the reality of our lives. So we don't really stick with the messy middle. What happens when we get into the messy middle is we run for the high hills. We either quit or we numb. We reach for things to make ourselves not feel the messy middle. But here's the thing, if you don't feel the messy middle, you're never going to get past it. You'll never get to the other side. She also says to rumble requires taking breaks and circling back when necessary. So there are periods of rumbling with change, with the change process, where the most graceful thing you can do is allow yourself to back off a little bit and acclimate to that new altitude. But there's a difference, and I've spoken about this actually in many podcasts before. There's a difference between acclimating and stagnating. Acclimating is when you really kind of lean into discomfort for a while, acquiring new skills and up-leveling your life. And then you just need to acclimate for a bit before you press on. Where stagnating is the unwillingness to ever begin the rumble. The other thing she emphasizes that I want to address before I move on is she says a rumble is to be fearless in owning our parts, meaning we're willing to get to know all of ourselves and leave the shame and the judgment at the door. Because to lead ourselves well through our life, we must be willing to get to know ourselves. And there are parts of yourself that you'd probably rather not be introduced to because it's not all pretty. It's not all butterflies and rainbows, but that's okay. That's human. And we must learn, as she closes this definition of rumbling, we must learn to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. And ladies, we love to dictate to our bodies our expectations, but we are not listening to what our bodies are asking of us. We have an agenda that we want our bodies to rise up to. We want it to look a certain way, perform a certain way, be hyper productive, super amazing, and all the things. And yet we're not asking what it needs of us. So we must learn to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. So Again, health, in my opinion, is a relationship with self that needs to be nurtured. It is a practice of righting, correcting decisions and habits that may no longer be serving us and maybe never did. Health is a kind of a practice and an exercise of rumbling between who we have been in the past and ultimately who we want to be in the future. So the way I look at rumbling is a practice. And you know I love the word practice. I use it in almost every episode I've done because practicing implies imperfection. We practice things we want to become better at. And practice can be challenging. It often is. It can be really messy. It definitely highlights your strengths and your weaknesses. It gives you a lot of opportunity to manage your thoughts and emotions. And ultimately, it allows you to stand face to face with your behaviors. So rumbling is practice. And my hope is that you will practice, that you will rumble for the rest of your life. Because that's where the magic is. A willingness to rumble with ourselves is how we become the best versions of ourselves. Rumbling is how we learn, it's how we grow, and ultimately it's how we become stronger and more confident in who we are. Now, I will tell you, I rumble all the time. I mean, I rumble daily. I rumble multiple times a day with myself. But some rumbles are bigger than others, right? And some moments that I have really rumbled with in my life, definitely motherhood. I have shared the story before that, there are women who really gracefully transition into motherhood. I was not one of those mothers. Motherhood hit me like a tsunami. It was very ungraceful. The first year of my son's life was probably one of the most difficult years of my life. I didn't handle it well, physically, mentally, in any way. And I was rumbling. I was rumbling with a new identity. I was rumbling with the sense of losing my freedom, of being responsible for this amazing little human. There was a lot of rumbling in that first year of motherhood for me. And I stayed in the arena. I kept rumbling because I was so fiercely committed to that kid. Still am. And am I a perfect mother? Not by a long shot. I think everyone in my family would agree with that. But I am a mother. I'm a capable mother. And motherhood is a part of my identity now. And I feel really confident in many ways as a mother, not always. But I never could have said that had I not been willing to wrestle with motherhood and with the newness of it. The same with my career. I have changed directions in my career many, many times. I've always been in the wellness industry, and I have always given myself a lot of permission to evolve. So when something no longer feels like it fits me, I move forward. And truly, for me, I feel like my career has been an expansion. So everything I've done in my career has served what I do now. It just looks very different. But holy cow, did I rumble with, feeling like things weren't fitting and not really sure what the next step was. And I just allowed myself to be in that uncertainty and trust that if I kept looking and I kept looking through different lenses, I would figure it out. And I did. Same with my business. I rumble with my business all the time. And I've rumbled with my health because as I've aged, what my body demands to stay in a good state of health is different than what it needed from me even 5 years ago. And so there is a sort of a discomfort, a period of time where I don't really know what that looks like, but I'm committed to figuring it out because I feel that I owe it to my body. So I don't know what you're rumbling with, but I know you've rumbled. You've rumbled in a lot of spaces and places in your life. And health is no different. If you want something more for your health, for your life, if you want to expand and grow as a human, which I really believe is the whole reason we're here, is to expand and grow as humans, you must be willing to rumble. You must be willing to get in the arena, get dirty, get sweaty, not really be sure of what you're doing, and get to know yourself. And you could choose, the reality is you could choose to never rumble. A lot of people do. A lot of people choose to never set foot in the arena. And those people never get to learn about themselves, right? They convince themselves that it's safer and a lot less work not to rumble. And in some ways, that's very true. But not rumbling is really just a path to stagnation. And I've long said, stagnant places are where things go to die, right? And fester, not to thrive and grow. So if you're not rumbling, you're not really living. You're either not taking chances in your life, you're not taking risks, or you are taking some risks, but then you're buffering so you don't have to feel any of the hard parts of the rumble. And buffering means that you're using something externally to change your emotional landscape. So maybe you're using alcohol, maybe you're using food, maybe you're using Netflix or social media, maybe you're a workaholic, maybe you focus all the time on other people's problems. But often we take chances and then we're not really even authentically there because we're numbed out. We're distracted. So I am going to assume that as someone listening to this podcast, you are someone who's ready to rumble. And if that's the case, congratulations. That is an awesome, beautiful thing. The willingness to rumble is everything. So I want to arm you with a few ideas that I believe will help you to rumble well with whatever it is you're rumbling with. Maybe it's trying to improve your relationship with exercise. Maybe you're trying to improve your diet. Maybe you're trying to manage your mindset or your emotions a little bit better. Maybe you really want to change careers. Maybe you really want to ask that guy out, but you just don't really feel worthy right now. Whatever it is you are rumbling with, here's how you stay in the rumble. Here's how you rumble well. Number one, know your reasons for stepping into the arena to begin with. Why are you willing to get messy, to get a little scuffed up? Why is this thing something worth pursuing? Why is it worth failing for? Now, the reason I keep emphasizing failing for something is because success demands failure. I know that's a hard truth that a lot of us would like just to omit, but it's absolutely true. Success is stacking failures. And if we're not willing to fail, we're not really willing to succeed. So why is this thing something you are willing to fail for? I would also say you rumble well by being realistic about your capacity and your goal. Now, what I mean by that is time and energy are both limited resources. And I feel like when we commit to something new in our lives, changing a behavior, doing something different, we kind of go into it dedicating way too much time and energy to the thing, and quite frankly, time and energy that we don't really have. So we wonder why we burn out so quickly. And a really simple way of saying this is don't set the bar so high when you're first setting out to change something in your life. Make winning easy. Make the amount of time and energy you have to dedicate small. Because if you can win, if you can get yourself a few wins, you're more likely to keep showing up. And the more you show up, the more resilient you get. The more resilient you get, the more energy and time you can dedicate. But don't start with these absurd ideas about how much time and energy you can really dedicate, because I think a lot of us are kidding ourselves. I also think that sometimes we set the goals so high and the timeline so short. So I say, whatever your goal is, let it be your goal, right? If you want to make $10 million, great. But let's not do it by next month, right? Maybe make that your 10-year goal, your 5-year goal, right? If you want to lose 50 pounds, let's not do it in 30 days. Let's give yourself a little more time, because you know what time does? Time helps to soften the intensity. It helps to soften the overwhelm. And when you are less overwhelmed, you are actually more likely to take action. So you can have your big, scary goals, but you need to be realistic with your timelines. The other way you rumble well is to do all you can to build and maintain both mental and physical resilience, right? Because think about it. If you're wrestling, you're rumbling with something, and you are mentally and physically resilient, you're going to come out in good shape. You really are. And you're going to have more endurance. So one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is, I believe that one of the most important things that we could do in any change process is manage our thoughts and emotions, because your mindset drives everything. But if you are not taking chemical responsibility for yourself, it's really hard to manage your thoughts and emotions. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're not sleeping well at night, if you're not eating well, if you're not hydrated, if you're not moving your body, all those things, it can be really difficult to have mental resilience. And so I always say that we have a chemical responsibility when we want to do big things in our life. Because if we are not mentally and physically resilient, it will be very difficult to attain the thing. Or maybe even if you attain the thing, you may not enjoy it because you're so broken down from the process of attaining it. That sucks. You also rumble well by becoming a really awesome observer, observing yourself. I've long said this, that I don't really care what my clients are doing in terms of exercise or food. I care about why they're doing those things. Why do you do what you do? This is the getting to know yourself part. What is motivating your behavior? It's a really good thing to pay attention to. You rumble well by being strategic. So I always think of, I know this is funny, I'm even bringing this up, but mixed martial arts, MMA, right? A lot of people think about it as cage fighting. And for years I thought, oh my gosh, what a barbaric and horrific sport. But I didn't really know much about it. And then by way of a lot of my own training and being introduced to a lot of people who are in that world, I really started to understand that, holy cow, these fighters are actually incredibly skilled movers. They're martial artists, and martial arts as a movement practice is no joke. If you've ever studied any kind of martial art, they're highly disciplined practices. And now when I watch MMA fighting, I can see the strategies. I can see the practice. I can see what brilliant movers these fighters are. And it just makes me think of rumbling, right? That when we're rumbling with ourselves, strategy is so important, meaning you have to have a plan of attack, right? You have to have a game plan for whatever it is you're pursuing. Without a plan, it just gets very sloppy and it takes way longer than necessary. And you may not have the endurance for it to take that long. I would also say to rumble well, you have to be willing to experiment. I say this over and over and over again to my clients and to my communities. Nobody knows you the way you know you. Nobody will ever live in your body. Nobody will ever be able to crawl into your brain and have your mental experience. And so I cannot say definitively what will work for you to create the level of health that you crave or to live a really fulfilling life. But I do know for sure if you're willing to experiment with trying different things on, you will, through a process of elimination, eventually figure out what works for you. We just don't like doing that. We just want to know from the outset that whatever I'm putting time and energy into is going to work forever. And my friends, that is not the way life works. We have to be willing to experiment, and then something might work for a while, and then it may not work anymore. And then we have to be willing to experiment again. I would also say pace yourself, right? And this kind of goes back to extending the timeline of your goals. If you go so fast and furious, you're going to burn yourself out. And you're going to do a face plant long before you ever arrive at your goal. Be open to feedback. We rumble well when we're willing to get outside perspective on where we could improve our strategy, how we could become more mentally and physically resilient. But if we go into rumbling thinking that we know it all, right? I laugh when I say that, know it all, because my 10-year-old son right now kind of does think he knows it all. And it's just so funny to me, right? That a 10-year-old is so confident that they know everything about everything. But man, we kind of act like that sometimes, don't we, as adults? That we're building a new skill in our life and we act like we should be perfect at it and we should know everything about it, which is crazy because it's new to us. Just because you're a human doesn't mean you should know all things about all things. So be open to feedback and getting help. And I'm going to end on that note that getting support is really paramount to rumbling well. Who are the people cheering you on? Who are the people that, don't encourage you to quit, but encourage you to persevere? Who are the people that will tell it to you straight, who will not sugarcoat and truly have your best interest at heart, even when they're saying things you don't necessarily want to hear? Because that's what good support does. The number of mentors and teachers in my life that have said things to me that I did not want to hear is countless. And yet it is exactly what I needed to hear. So who are those people in your life? And if you don't have those people in your life, where could you find people like that? So I hope this gave you maybe just something to think about, right? Like, are you rumbling right now in your life with something? If so, what is it? And how might you be able to make that rumble a little more graceful so it doesn't feel so unnecessarily difficult? And please, if nothing else, I hope you walk away with this, just with the reminder that when you up-level your life, it is not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard because hard things are what strengthen us. Hard things are what make us more resilient. And that's why when we get to the other side of accomplishing those things, we feel so amazing. Because we prove to ourselves that we can do those things, even when it is hard. And I believe that that's kind of why when we commit to something new, inevitably something happens right out of the gate that makes it more difficult. So you're doing it right. If you feel like it's challenging, it's probably something worth pursuing. It's probably going to change your life in some really profound ways. So next episode, which I'm going to go not next week, but the following week. So I'm going back to twice a month. We will talk all about rising, which I'm really excited about. But in the meantime, if you've never left a review for this podcast and you enjoy it and you want to see it stay in production and you support the message, please head on over to iTunes and just take 2 minutes of your time to leave a review. I know that I ask that a lot of this community, but I ask it for a reason. It gets more ears on the show. When people do look at reviews and when they see good reviews, they too want to listen. So it is a simple and very easy way for you to support the podcast if you are interested in supporting the podcast. You're amazing. I know we're in difficult times. But I have so much faith that we were built to move through this. And I hope that you have that little bit of faith within you as well. And I'm thinking of you and your families. I hope you are safe. I hope you are healthy. And I hope that I will see you again here for the next episode. Have a wonderful day, and I will be back soon. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.